December 2022. I'd like to begin with the acknowledgement of the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the land. City of Prospect acknowledges that we are on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region, and we pay our respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. I'd now like to read the Council Pledge. We seek wisdom and understanding as we face the duties of our united task, praying for the peace and prosperity of our city. Okay, let's get things underway. So item 2, on leave we have Neil, and apologies we have listed in the agenda Councillor Nelson, and also I'd like to add Councillor Lillian Pollard is also an apology. Item 4 on the agenda, declaration by members of a conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? From the chair, I'll be declaring a conflict of interest with regards to confidential item number 16.1. A general conflict of interest, and I'll be leaving the room and inviting the Deputy Mayor to take the chair for that confidential item. As I need to just clarify on the executive of the club where some of the people who are nominated for those awards are from, so I think it's best that I leave the meeting. If there's no other conflicts of interest to declare, item 5 is confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stanton, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnett, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Fantastic. I don't see any need to ask the mover to sum up. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Okay. Item 6 on the agenda, public question time. As a reminder, a maximum period of 15 minutes total, maximum time of 3 minutes per person, and the presiding member may allow for extension of time if appropriate. The members of the public who would like to present today. That being the case, we'll move on to next item. Item 7, petitions, there are nil. Item 8, deputations, there are nil. Item 9, questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? Happy to move on. Item 4, 3, 2, 1. Fantastic. Moving on to item 10 on the agenda, reports for decisions. So item 10.1 on page 5, Percy Street Reserve update. As a reminder, there was a change to the recommendations from the original agenda was circulated today. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the updated recommendations?
No. But I'll do so shortly.
Would you like us to hum some?
Is the amendment on the screen?
The amendments on the screen, yeah.
Chris, sorry.
Oh.
Haven't taken any questions, otherwise I'll call for a mover to get her on the floor. Councillor Tweena, when would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you for the report and the amendment. It's taken a few months for us to have that conversation with the neighbour, and I think that conversation was much needed for us to explore whether straightening the boundary was a possibility. Now that the property owner have decided to not go ahead with the land swap, I'm hoping that we can quickly support the new recommendation, and hopefully the new concept plan will come back to us, because I believe that we've had 2 consultation rounds for the community members, and I hope to see something come back to us that's more crime friendly in that little pocket, so that we can get it out to our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Barnett, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I think just to agree with what Councillor Navish said.
Thank you very much. Do I have any further questions or any further discussions? Councillor Brew.
This
Deputy Mayor.
this has been a long process, I think, predates this council, and there was lots of conversation about this. I guess my only question is, Mayor, is if the property was to change ownership and a new owner wanted to have a similar conversation in terms of land swap or a way to do with that secluded corner, because at the end of the day, this does nothing to do with that particular issue. Are we able to do that, noting that the design elements might have something planted there or installed in concrete there, or might be a swing there, or whatever it might be? But I presume this doesn't preclude us from revisiting this in the future, or does it preclude us from revisiting this in the future? Maybe pose it as a question.
So, no, the respond directly to that.
Mrs. Lane, I'm not sure if you want to speak to this. Mrs. Lane?
Through you there. The design will come back to council early in 2023, and we would know at that time we'll have, I suppose, the area defined, and it will allow for this to occur in the future. Effectively, just landscape items that will be incorporated within that area, so those landscape items will be effectively designed to discourage effectively congregation and crime prevention techniques, but it will allow for a future exercise of that if a subsequent owner decides that it's a significant issue, and this council then decides it's something that we're worth pursuing, noting that it's reasonably common to have these corners, entrance corners in our reserves throughout the city.
Thank you. Any further questions? Any further questions or any further discussion on the motion? That being the case, Councillor Twedwin, would you like to sum up?
No, thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, can I have a vote, please? All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. I just thought I might point out, probably too late, but SEPTED, for the benefit of the new members of those not moving term, stands for
Crime prevention through, sorry, Sam. Crime prevention through environmental design principles.
wonderful. Okay, item 10.2 on page 6 of the agenda. There's some recommendations there. So the item is federal budget funding, local roads and community infrastructure, LRCI program, phase 3 projects. With a report pages 11 to 14, recommendations on page 12. Do I have a mover? Councillor Barnett would like to speak to the motion.
Yes, as contained in the report, it's really swapping around some grant funding and but it's mainly some of these popping around to take into account the proposed big drain project, and so I think given that and that we could be looking at future grant funding opportunities for the upgrade of the Islington Shared Path from the State Bicycle Fund, which opens in early 2023. And under the implications, you'll read that overall council's financial position is not impacted, as grant funding will be allocated to fully funded capital renewal works as previously identified. It's been problematic, this Islington Shared Path project, over the years. You know, it was sort of like the path that led nowhere. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to tidy all this up. There have been problems with it also since then. The 1838 project has been built, and there've been a lot of problems with that back path of that project, with weeds and looking very unkempt, and no respectful bicyclist that I understand would really want to go down there at any rate. So hopefully they would get all this tidied up with this motion. So I commend it to you.
Thank you, councillor Barnett. Do I have a second? Councillor Backer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, it's always disappointing when you don't see sort of projects fully realised in the time frame that you're wanting. However, I think it's really sensible that we're not sort of digging things up and then, you know, paving them and then digging them up again. However, what I didn't see in the motion, and maybe a question through the chair, the communication piece with any of the community and stakeholders about some of the existing project. So how are we communicating, I guess, with the community on the delay?
Good question, Sarah. Can I ask you to direct that to Rowan?
Sure, Mrs. Blainer, are you able to take it?
Through you, Mayor. This is as it relates to the Islington Shared Path project. We haven't commenced that project in terms of any sense of concept development to commence the community engagement. In terms of how we would engage with respect to that project, at this point, we're not envisaging a communications plan with respect to a delay in the delivery, because we haven't actually started the consultation. So that's the current.
Yeah, there wasn't any expectation there at this stage.
There's no stakeholders that we've engaged with. There's no expectation other than the fact that it does reside in the annual business plan, and the community at large can have regard for that in terms of deliverable for council. So through the council reporting, that's as it's currently being engaged with, subject to, as we get towards the end of the year, we've got some, we don't have an understanding of the delivery, well then that's maybe the time that we consider a broader communication piece.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, do we have any further discussion on the motion? With that being the case, councillor Barnett, would you like to sum up?
No, that's I'm happy with it as is.
Thanks very much. So let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Now, elected members, I had planned to recommend suspending formal meeting procedures for item 10.3 through to 10.6. However, what I'd like to suggest, if you're okay with it, is that we address item 10.4 ahead of item 10.3, and then we'll suspend meeting procedures. Well, then I'll recommend suspending meeting procedures for item 10.3, 10.5 and 10.6. So I'm just going to say a quick show of hands if everyone's okay with addressing things in that order. This is not a vote, just a roll for that. All right, thanks very much. Item 10.4, voluntary membership to Prospect Arts Action Network and Citywide Public Art Roundtable on pages 36 to 46 of the report, with a recommendation on page 36. Now, we did have a recommendation, however, I understand that Councillor Backer has requested an alternative motion, which I believe is being circulated today.
I've seen it.
Circulated. Okay, is it on the screen?
Yes.
Yep. So what I just discussed this morning, and I agreed that I'd be fine with accepting this if we review this motion, move, speak, second, and vote on it. If we're happy to do that, if it gets up, then we won't need to run with the previous recommendation that was circulated as part of the agenda. So I will give everybody a minute to review the alternative motion that's been tabled, and once we've had a chance to review, then I'll call for a mover.
I'm happy to read it out. Is
Go
that
for it.
usually what I do?
You can if you want, yeah.
So having considered item 10.4, I think it is, voluntary membership to Prospect Arts Action Network PAN and the Citywide Public Art Roundtable, CWAR, receives and notes the report, resolves to review the current governance of City of Prospects Arts Action Network and Citywide Public Art Roundtable, resolves to review the strategic alignment of current and future City of Prospects various art programs against the strategic community plan. A report be provided to council on the outcomes of the review with options recommendations addressing the outcomes of the review by May 2023. Resolves that an interim delegation be provided to the Chief Executive Officer to ensure the public art and Newmarch Gallery continue to operate. It doesn't give some background, but am I able to speak to it at all, or
Well, I'll call for a move, and I assume
Aye.
you'd like to move it.
I'd like to move it, please.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Backer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Yeah, so to thank you to staff and to Mayor Larwood for considering the alternative motion, and I'll just give you a bit of background to it. I guess with the City of Prospect, we're known as a creative community, and we have been for many years. In many ways, we've kind of centred a lot of our projects around art and creativity, and it's a really important factor in our community and a lot of our projects. I guess over previous weeks, you would have had presentations from the different departments. And I guess where I'm keen to have a look at how some of these groups that were established maybe 8 years ago align with the new direction that the new council might want to go in. And I guess I'm going to use the word placemaking. So a lot of what we do at City of Prospect, and done it quite successfully, is placemaking. And I guess it involves art, economic development, infrastructure. So there's that overlap. And you have to also appreciate that within a small council like Prospect, having a number of committees, formal and informal, is also a degree of administration as well. So I guess in nominating the CEO to take the role of, say, an elected member until May, that allows the current projects. So, for example, there's been some great work done down at the Ovingham Bridge. Just a question through the chair, are we having an opening there,
Open.
or it's open already?
No,
Maybe I missed that one.
It was actually supposed to be a more formal opening on Sunday, but it was delayed because there was some issues with some of the surfaces of one of the courts that they put on there. And maybe there was other reasons why, but yeah, there was supposed to be something.
Anyway, there's some great work happening down there, and that's a really good example of some of the projects. But the other thing as well is I've consulted with some of the directors too, is that maybe that if we see this as a key piece of work like art and creativity, that there's actually budget lines in a lot of our infrastructure projects. So if we've got for example, a park, it's not just we do the park and then the art is done as a separate piece. There's actually a placemaking agenda done with some of that as a budget line embedded in the project. So the art may be the play structure, or so we're doing this informally, but I think my motion intends to just put a bit sort of tighter governance around it and ensures that it will align with any future strategic plan that we may have. So, but I'm open to amendments or questions.
Thank you, Councillor Becker. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bone.
yes, I'm happy to second it on the grounds that with a new council coming in, I think it's most probably an opportune time, like we're doing with other things, to have another look at this. Now, I understand that the Prospect Arts Action Network has already set its 23 program, and yes, I'm just wondering, I know we've got interim delegation to the CEO, and we have staff there also that are connected with and running in charge of the Newmarch Gallery and the arts sort of area. So yeah, I'm just thinking review by May 2023. So I'm just wondering how things aren't going to be held up if we do this, that there will still be a program operating, the Newmarch Gallery will still operate and all that. So I'm just thinking out loud here. But I'm just wondering where the current other volunteers that are not elected members that are on these things. So what's their standing? Do they still just continue until such time as the review comes up in May? Because I think they'll be very disappointed if they haven't been consulted and they're, sort of not on there with a volunteer task.
Sounds like there's a
do.
question there, Councillor Bone.
Yes. So I think, did I inflect enough to ask? the
So,
question?
can I ask you to direct that question to the appropriate director?
So
please?
I'll repeat the question I heard and then
Yeah.
I'll answer that.
Okay.
The question I heard is, how will I exercise this delegation over the coming 6 months whilst this review is undertaken and prior to the report coming back to council? If that is the question you're asking, my
I think
response to
I think
that
there was
is,
a further question regarding the voluntary members of the
Yes,
boards and
which will be answered together, because they're hand in glove.
yeah,
My interpretation of this motion as it's moved is that essentially the operation of HAN and CWAR would essentially be suspended whilst we undertake the review. The programs that are currently in place for public art and for the Newmarch Gallery, I would essentially direct staff to undertake to progress those under delegation. So we'll continue the current programs with no change. That may well require us, for example, to consult with members of the community who are involved in a range of those programs, and I'll be taking advice from staff on who to talk to and when about that. But ultimately, I'm there to make sure that the current program is delivered. But what it will mean is that there will be no meetings of those groups whilst we undertake the review, and instead that essentially I'll be giving effect to whatever programs are currently in place. If additional programs are needed, we will be again delivering those under delegation, just as we would with any other program. And if we do again need to consult with members of the community, we'll do that. But my interpretation of this motion is that the committees, because again, what we're asking here for is membership of these groups. And if we don't have complete groups, they can't really operate. That's my sense of it. Now, again, if that's not the intention of council, you might want to make that clear, but that's how I read the motion that's in front of you right now.
yes, because I mean, assuming if this will get up tonight, then we actually have an end of the year social session with the two groups as members coming up. So on this Thursday. So I can see it could be a bit of an uncomfortable situation, because unless they're told straight after the meeting, if this passes, yeah, I just think it's a bit of an uncomfortable position, and there's maybe some very unhappy members of those groups. So again, my secretary follow-up question is, how are we going to manage the information to the members of the groups that are not elected members and staff through the chair?
So through you, Mayor Larwood, my answer to that would be, again, it would require us to engage. Ms. Taylor, do you have anything to add in relation to how we do this?
Through the mayor, I think if this motion was passed, this evening, we've certainly been making those phone calls personally. I think that would be the right thing to do with the group. I understand that there is that catch up, and it's also that the meetings that have already been sent out ready for next year. So it would certainly be a very personal approach, but stipulating that it's just a 12 under review.
Okay. All right, I'll leave it there then.
Is there any further back, Deputy Mayor?
Look, thank you. I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable about this one, and from the outset would probably reflect that it's quite different to the initial motion, particularly if we're stopping a committee operating for the next 6 months. That's certainly not implied in the variation. But notwithstanding that, it still feels quite a so we're going to elect people to a committee, and now we're saying we're going to review that committee and not elect somebody onto it. Just my comment to begin with. I would ask if we could take it in parts as well. We'll get to both, that's possible, Mayor. So look, I won't be supporting it on the basis that I think that the value of having elected members on the committee for a review process is quite valuable. I think there's value in having that. We've only got 2 members around this table, I believe, who have had any exposure to these groups. The rest of us have not. And so, you know, having new elected members, or at least new elected members to the committee, would be quite useful, particularly if there's a review. I did have a question on the review. Is a review already planned as part of work plan activity for council for this 6 months, or is this a request to undertake a review?
That's it.
So through you, Mayor Larwood, no, this is not a planned review. So again, just to address the question I think that you raised in relation to the process. Members, we get requests from all of you on a regular basis to assist with preparing amendments to motions. This request from Councillor De Backer resulted in us assisting her in preparing or giving effect to, in words, her desires. And the reason you're seeing it first is because, of course, if we progress with the recommendation and then we run a ballot, the government's advice was this could be dealt with as an alternative motion up front, and that would make more sense rather than going through a whole ballot process after having suspended meeting procedures and then moving this as an alternative. So I think, again, if you're concerned about why this is happening this way, that was the advice provided to Councillor De Backer and the nearby staff. So hopefully that makes some sense as to why this is not a normal process that we normally move the recommendation first. In terms of the review, Councillor De Backer has requested. Again, she asked us how we might go about this, or how we could review this, and this is a way, you know, it could be done. Whether it meets with the approval of council obviously is a question for debate. We're not here to express a view in terms of the merits of this process or the recommended approach of simply just repopulating the existing committee. There may be other options which members can consider, but again, it's not for me to move. Councillor De Backer's moved her motion, and she's more than capable of arguing the toss on that.
So maybe just a second question. If this fails, do we go back to the original motion?
Probably we do, yeah.
Well, it's a matter for the council in the end, what we do with it. But yes, that is an option.
Yeah, okay. It's an unusual process I've not been part of before. So look, I think in terms of the intent around a review, I'm not particularly against that. But we do have a current strategic community plan at the moment, which we're going to have at least for the next 4 months. So that's not going to change, and it feels a little bit like horse before come. We've often talked about doing policy on the run here, and it feels a little bit like we're going to make this change, but then do the plan, and then whereas for me, reviewing the plan and then whatever falls out of that might be reviews of a whole lot of things we do, including this. So just on that basis, I just feel uncomfortable with it, particularly that you know, the first I've read about it was literally 5 minutes ago. So I won't personally be supporting it, and so if we could be taking parts or our parts, I will support it, obviously, but not the intent to do the review and not the intent to delegate the responsibility of the CEO. That's just my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion around the table? Councillor Sweetman.
Question. So with the review process, while that's been undertaken, will these two groups stop operation? Is that right?
I think item 5 is suggesting that the groups won't, well, the groups themselves, there won't be meetings, they won't be run as they currently are. The staff will be charged with making decisions. The CEO will be given interim delegation to ensure that Public Art and Newmarch Gallery continue to operate. So it's not suggesting a full stop to the programs, it's just suggesting that the groups be temporarily put on hold until the review is carried out. And the CEO's responsibility is to make sure that the wheels keep turning.
I just have a question, sorry.
Have a very brief question.
I'm just wondering whether the chair would suspend meeting the meeting to allow more informal discussion on this.
Look,
Given it's
I
brand
think given
new.
there's been some concerns expressed around the table and there hasn't been a lot of time to digest it, then if the elected members are happy for me to recommend that, then I am happy to suggest suspending formal meeting procedures for 16 minutes, just because I like rounding things up
Till 7 p.m.
till 7 p.m. Sorry. Show of hands, are we happy with suspending meeting procedures? Thank you very much. Okay. Open discussion.
I'm just thinking, what would the community, the members of these two groups, how would they feel when, like, if this was to come to them after tonight, if it was to pass, how would they? I don't know how they will take it. And just concerned about that.
Yeah, look, I mean, the process was a bit, I'll speak frankly, so I'm really keen to see a Renew Adelaide style process for art, I guess. So there's overlaps because we've had presentations from the directorates, but I haven't really heard yet how they're working together. I mean, I know they are, but we don't have a committee across those things. So I sent an email because it was the last day before motions, and I didn't hear back until yesterday, I think it was. And look, and I appreciate this is a situation that often happens where I ask for assistance with a motion, and what comes back is probably not my intent. And I've got to take ownership of those words, so I totally get that. But what my intent was is that I guess the thing is that with a lot of these groups, there's I guess we're putting elected members on, and it's sort of, where do we get the opportunity to reshape it as a new council? I'm just cognizant, having been in the audit committee, how we can be innovative and do things slightly differently. And it's not to say that we're not using, the same people might not be on there, or we're not consulting, but obviously I couldn't see in the motion that that wasn't having regular meetings and it was suspended. Maybe I didn't read that. That's what you're reading into it.
So again, by delegating responsibility to me to
Yeah.
make decisions, my expectation was that, I mean, there's little point in the group's meeting if they're not going to make any decisions. If I'm being called upon to make the decisions.
And I
That
think
was-
this is the other thing I was unsure about as well, because they're not a section 41 committee, but they're decision making.
Well, they make recommendations, staff follow, I think it's an.
So that, and
unusual
that,
process,
yeah, and
which
that was the thing I was a bit
concerns us.
uncomfortable about as well. So for example, if we go back to the Galway Avenue, and we've got councillors standing here, the sculpture, which was, you know,
This order of things.
that arrived. Now, you know, the reason that elected members informally are kept out of art decisions is so we don't get political about art. And I totally get that. Totally get that. However, you know, I'm just trying to think of ways that we can, as a new council, go, okay, what's the status quo and how are we going forward with it? And other councillors, you know, might be right in that, look, we've already got a community plan, we're running with it for the next 12 months. Nominate a couple of elected members to those groups so you've got a bit of an idea how they're working. And then other elected members can bring that information back to help shape their decision making. Yeah, I'm quite happy for it to fall and vote someone on in the next one.
I haven't taken a few more questions, councillor Barnett, but councillor Stan and Trin, just wondering if you guys have got some thoughts on this. So we're informal here, we can just have it.
My only thought is that I would hate to stop the train running. Like if there is things that are happening, hopefully this won't actually delay that process because things take so long anyway. Will it actually impede the progress of those committees?
Well, the committees won't be operating if we're reading this the way that.
Yeah, well, I didn't understand that, so.
I think
that's an input.
from the PAN perspective, the gallery program is in train and PAN's work would be looking at the following year now. So there might be, if this is the approach, there might be a delay in kicking off. Barley, have you got any?
Oh, I was just going to mention through that, I guess the thing to, particularly with PAN, is those art connections to be able to encourage and attract those artists to display here as well. That's, I guess, quite a key role that they play through those gender programs.
Trin, have you got any thoughts on?
Well, maybe, like Alison said, because she wasn't aware of what, you know, the
That
motions
information.
yeah, so maybe we could just
That's fine.
revise it.
Sorry.
Yeah, so for it to still be able to continue while we do the review.
Yeah, I was going to suggest if there's anyone who hasn't spoken yet, they might be inclined to put forward an amendment to the recommendations. And it looks like I particularly like item 3 because I think that not that we don't have a community plan in place, but having been involved in QPAR or QAR, there hasn't necessarily, from my perspective, been an alignment with here's what we'd like this group to think about. Go ahead and do something that's in line with other things that we're considering. So particularly like that recommendation would seem to me that we could continue, we could receive the report fairly easily. We could continue with the process as it currently stands, whilst a review is undertaken, and if that meant that we called for an amendment that number 5 on the recommendations was no longer part of it, if that's the process, then that might achieve your purpose, councillor Backer, of the review, but it also would mean that the people who are on these committees donate their time voluntarily, and they do have connections. Once you lose those connections, then there is momentum lost, and yeah, I think that might, if that was an outcome that you thought achieved what you all were looking for, Alison, but didn't disrupt things too much for the balance of this budget year.
Can I ask you a question? From what I understand that you want to do is, rather than have things that we do and then we bolt on afterwards. And I think the only example I can think of is when I saw the Broadview Sports Complex for the first time. I felt it was very slab-like, and I'm thinking, well, maybe we could put some, welded cockatoos on the outside and things like that. And the answer was that, yeah, we're going to do that later. And I'm
It
thinking,
shouldn't be, it should be.
yeah, so
Yeah.
what you're saying is that maybe we could have done it by recessing the bricks or something
And
like
the
that.
discussion I've had with Farley is that the director Taylor, was that we embed a line in our projects. We're spending a lot of money on these projects. So to have a bolt-on solution and then pushing back, that is not a best practice way of working.
Yeah.
It may, so it's very hard to know what levers to push and pull to kind of get some of those outcomes, and it might not be the right way.
Well, from an artistic perspective, sometimes it would be very difficult to come up with the concept until you got the situation there. However, the planning is something that the planning and the embedding of
And
project
the budget
in
line.
there. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just two questions. One, just in terms of the review, could I ask CEO, I presume you don't have staff sitting around twiddling thumbs. So if we're going to do a review, which is going to take the best part of 6 months, what's not going to happen?
Yeah.
So through you, Mayor Larwood, look, I'd have to toss that over to my directors, because there will be an opportunity cost, there's no doubt.
So,
And yeah, look, 6 months to undertake a review, it's gonna slow other things down, and we'd have to take a look at the community plan. Ms. Taylor, have you got anything to add? And then it's kind of how long.
Yeah, certainly. So that timeframe is developed because the key people that will be involved in this review will also be busy with twilights, you've got fringe, that kind of thing. So that's February, March. So I did sort of put that timeframe and think about it to allow us time to, I guess, work through those events. But February, March and into April is our busiest time of the year. So, and those key people will actually be involved in delivering those events, those community programs. So I just needed to be mindful of that. I was also thinking around the lines of your strategic community planning process at the same time. So you've been doing a lot of that work around February and then starting to think about what you're going to roll out of that strategic community plan, and could some of that be picked up just initially through some of those programs there as well. So that was the thinking around timing.
and my second question is just in relation to the whether, and sorry, this might have been asked before, has any consultation happened with the members yet? Because we often talk here about consulting with people before we make decisions. We talked about some things at the last meeting along that line. So this will be, unless they're watching on YouTube right now, this is going to be a complete surprise to them.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll maintain my position on this.
Yeah. Yes, again, I think it was saying that we've got it topsy-turvy, I think, and it was talked about that we can be doing a review because we'll be having our strategic planning and all that happening with our new council in February. But my concern is that it could backfire, I think, on us if we just suddenly announce this and in 24 hours. Some quite long-standing people, who've given a lot of volunteer time. I think would, quite frankly, both them have, put quite out of joint and all the rest of it. And a lot of goodwill would go, I think. So I think somehow I would prefer that we can do the review, and that's by May, but I think we still need to have the two groups continue. If we want to not have even elected members and just have the mayor is on both of the two groups, so we would still have an elected member there. So, I mean, because we'd be having them to review the references of the group, how it operates, and all that sort of type of thing. So I think we best to say, okay, we agree with having a review, but the two groups who are, the volunteers basically, in a sense, with the mayor, but we needn't necessarily have the elected members on there until after the review. Or we just go ahead and do what we have done in the previous thing, but change it to say that that there will be a review and whatever. So I haven't got any wording in my mind. So, but that's essentially how I think it would be far better and for us to do this and still maintain, the goodwill and the people that invested a lot of voluntary time in this process, some of them over many years.
Yeah, regional points. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Can I suggest, I had a discussion with the CEO. What I'm going to recommend is that I'm going to do a quick straw poll on each of the items there as part of the variation. If it doesn't look like there's the appetite overall for a proportion of them, that we withdraw the alternative motion, we revert to the recommendation, we take nominations and vote, but we add any of the points in the alternate motion to the original recommendation that we might want to retain and then vote on that.
Can I ask a question? So you're saying we withdraw the motion and we could add 3 and 4 as a.
Well, we
Or
could
two.
withdraw the
Two,
alternative, we go to the recommendation, we take nominations,
Yep.
we look for an amendment to the recommendation to add in anything here where there's a strong likelihood of consensus agreement around.
Yep.
Through the straw poll, and then we move and second, discuss and vote on the amended recommendation.
No, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And look, and just to, I mean, obviously a nerve here, and that certainly wasn't my intention, because,
Yeah.
The email originally was basically, I think art has always makes positive contributions. So none of the background was captured in, because usually I put that as a background. But it's really just, when I sort of said this through, it was that I made that the structure of the CWR and PAN groups be reviewed and so basically aligns with our strategic direction about placemaking and embedded lines for art. Because I think this is the thing, we've got the biggest project in our city going on in Broadview, and I haven't heard mention of art anywhere. So please don't think that I'm attacking all the voluntary hours that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone.
No.
But I actually want to embed it in the projects we're doing instead of directorates operating separately.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor
Yeah.
Drew.
So can I ask a process question? Can we withdraw a motion after it's been moved and seconded?
Well,
Move-
just
move
vote
the
it
motion.
down. Just vote it down. That's- Could be lost, or you could
I've just
withdraw it.
asked for a
I
process.
can withdraw.
The mover can withdraw it,
And is it spoken to?
and then there's nothing to discuss.
If that'll be simple and quicker, and that means that,
I'll withdraw.
You can amend it.
well, we
the
go
other one.
back into.
But we might get consensus first before it's withdrawn. Well,
I'm happy to see a blended motion of the previous one.
Very quick, I'm gonna just run with what I said before, if that's okay.
yeah,
Quick show of hands, who would be in favour of part 1? That's receiving the report. Everyone's cool with that?
yeah,
No problems at all. Part 2?
Yeah.
All those who'd be in favour of. So we've only got 1, we've got 2,
well, it's
we've
all
got
review.
3.
Hmm.
Any more on 3? Any moving on 3? 3, 3, 3. We've got 4. We've got 4. You, but we
No,
was
no,
adjusting your
scratch, yeah.
So I think that's probably enough to say that
Yeah,
might be okay. Part 3. Who would be in favour of including that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the main. Council.
It looks like not everyone, but most
As
people.
long as it's, is this bolting it, we're bolting it to the other one?
That's what they're.
Yes, yeah,
Part
yeah.
4,
Yeah, well, we have to get a report on it, actually.
part 5. All right. Looks good. So that looks good. All right, let's bring this back into formal session. And so councillor Backer, you're happy to withdraw
I'm happy to withdraw the alternative.
the alternative motion.
Yep.
Okay, so that brings us back to the original recommendation. Now we'll test the waters on nominated positions. If we only have the requisite number, there's no need to go to a ballot. If we have more, then we will have a ballot. So I'm just going to keep going until you tell me I'm doing something wrong, CEO.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think the opportunity here is for now, if council wish to consider the 4 items for nomination.
Yeah.
They may wish to suspend meeting procedures and talk about membership for all 4 and then come back and resolve each one individually. Alternatively, you are on 10.4. So it is open to you to consider that one now.
I think it's a fantastic recommendation. So yeah,
The former or the latter, but I'll let you consider.
I'll let you know. I'm ready. The former. So I'm going to come up with this idea all by myself. I'm going to recommend that we suspend meeting procedures for, I think we're going to need a good 30 minutes for this one. If we should need it, I'd like to recommend suspending meeting procedures until 7:30, 28 minutes to discuss items 10.3, 4, 5 and 6. But we will, is everyone okay? Show of hands. Fantastic. All right, so why don't we continue with just the discussion on 10.4 whilst we're at it. So we're looking for 2 nominations for the Prospect Arts Action Network for the duration of term on council. Do I have anyone who would like to put their hand up? So can I just clarify, I don't know whether the mayor is automatically on this or not. The mayor is just, yeah.
I thought it was for both.
Yeah,
Terms
that's
of
right.
reference, don't say.
I've been on for quite a few years, so I'm happy to give
Yes.
someone else an opportunity and also for someone else to have an opportunity. And so do we have anyone who'd like to be on Pam first of all? Looking for 2 nominations.
Oh, I don't mind continuing on.
Okay. Do we have any further nominations for Pam? It's great fun. Very creative, dynamic environment, great discussions. You get to have your say on what appears downstairs in our fantastic gallery space.
I don't make
So
any,
we'll-
I don't
I
make
don't,
any
when is it on?
we have to,
Thursday,
it's on,
Thursday.
So I'm just thinking
Every
3D printing,
That's
that kind of stuff.
I'm just limited by my,
I think I saw Trin with a hand up
6
before,
o'clock.
so
Yeah,
if everyone's happy with that, then I'll
Yeah.
take councillor
Great.
Barnett. And Trin, thank you very much.
and
Sorry.
I might add, when I was on there, I don't think Alan did either, we didn't make artistic decisions, you know, about if they were choosing artists for the program or things like that, so.
So just
Yeah.
a question on that. So with the programs, it's aligned with things like our environmental agendas and all that kind of things as well. Like, is it aligned with, or is it
Well, it can be if the elected members point these things out,
right?
because I've pointed
Yes,
some
that's the
things
role of
out
the elected members,
before.
to bring those things to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so if we are happy with those 2 nominations, can I move on to 2 people to be appointed as members to Citywide Public Art Roundtable?
That's where there's the money that's.
Well, that's outside. Pan is,
Yeah.
my understanding, Pan's inside,
Yes.
QPAR is outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
But-
Just a question.
Yeah.
So the $25,000 for the citywide public art roundtable, is that to pay the members on the roundtable, or is it?
No,
That's for the,
That's a project.
So that's a project. Yep.
Nobody receives their remuneration.
There is a very small plate of cheese and the occasional half bottle of wine at some of the meetings, but apart from that, there's no payment for anyone on either of these committees. Okay,
and again, is there a set time for that? Or is that open for discussion?
it says for the term of the duration of the term of council.
Yeah, that.
And we move an amendment, because I know with a lot of our other committees that we've been looking at a 1-year term.
It's up to the members.
It's also open to a member to resign at any time if they want to give somebody else a go. So there are opportunities there to turn membership over in a proactive way, but it does rely on the membership and stability of membership also has benefits. So it's really a question for council. But yeah, I mean, you can move and limit if you wish.
Well, given that it's going to be under review,
Yeah, that's what I
would
was
it be
kind of.
better to have it initially, for the year, you know, like say
12 months and
12 months? Or,
Or if members are going to consider a report on the review in 6 months' time,
No,
that is
yeah.
not, you can,
No.
you can.
Yeah.
If you're going to dissolve the group and reconstitute it in some other form, then
Yeah.
it will be effective at that time.
yeah, so. I'm
It
just
just-
thinking, so if we do this, sorry, for the term of the council and then it comes back and says, something different. So can we rescind, are we able to then rescind the?
I think Theo was saying that the report might determine that the term is 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 or 2 + 2.
Yeah.
And then if that's adopted through the recommendations, when the report comes back, any decision that's been made beforehand is null and void, and it's now, as per the recommendations, to be voted on from the review. That's my understanding, CEO.
So through you, BLR, there's a range of ways you could do it, but again, what you're trying to do is predict the outcome of a review that hasn't happened yet. If the review recommends, for example, that the constitution or structure of these processes change, these groups would cease to exist in their current form. And if that happens and council adopt that and maybe appoint membership to a new group in its place, then it will cease to exist. And the fact that you've appointed membership to a committee that or a group that no longer exists means that those people will cease to be members of that group.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification and questions. Still looking for 2 nominations to be on QPAR. Is it 4 meetings a
Quarterly.
year?
I think it's
Director Taylor?
Oh, am I allowed to be on both?
Certainly
Yes,
can.
please.
Yeah. Sorry, Director Taylor, is it 4 or 6
I think so quarterly.
Has Lillian
quarterly?
expressed an interest, Mark? Or
Hey.
has Lillian expressed an interest?
Not in this particular one, no. Not that one.
Okay,
Yes.
anybody else?
Great place. to make a chair.
I'd nominate if I can change the term to 12 months.
You can,
Resign.
You can resign after 12 months if you want. If the
Yeah, I
group's
know,
still
but I
exists.
would prefer if I can change it to 12 months.
well, you're welcome to add an amendment.
Yeah.
To the recommendations.
Because it's just consistency with our other sort of committees and things.
Okay, so I haven't got a pencil, but I will pretend this is a pencil and I'll pencil. Great. All right, item 10.4 done. Let's go back in time to item 10.3, Garrock casual vacancy. So Greater Adelaide Region of Councils. So I met with the era mayors recently, except for Mayor Brea from Norwood wasn't in attendance, but Campbelltown, Burnside, Prospect, and Walkerville were in attendance. This has come about as per the report because Mayor Elizabeth Pickett from Walkerville, who was on Garrock, wasn't re-elected, so there's a vacancy. The discussion around the table amongst the era mayors, this is just a discussion, was that Don Palmer, who is either a elected member or maybe deputy mayor from the city of Unley, is keen to be nominated. And the further discussion was that it would look better if the era council showed a united front and got behind one nomination. And if that was the case, then there'd be 6 councils voting that way, which wouldn't guarantee the outcome, but it would go a reasonable way toward it. So that's one option. The other option is that if there's someone here who is very, very keen to be nominated, and there's obviously a subsequent ballot, as per item number 3, then that's the case. Bearing in mind that if we choose not to nominate someone and we're happy to let the member from Unley stand, then the recommendation only becomes recommendation 1, and parts 2 and part 3 are decided no longer required. So, having made that incredibly long speech, what do we all think of the option to not nominate someone as one?
So not nominating is effectively
That's not.
recommending the chap who wants to do it.
Well, we'll have to determine that when it comes to the part 3, but that's essentially putting our weight behind one era.
Not knowing anything about this, is there downsides to that?
I don't know the gentleman very well.
It's been a long time.
He's keen to be nominated. It shows the strength of the era councils if everyone's on board.
We don't lose a voice or anything like that?
We don't have as close a voice because there's not one of us sitting on the table. There's no guarantee that we would get on anyway, but through the close working relationship with the era mayors group and also the era CEOs group, there's plenty of opportunity to bring our thoughts to those forums, and they meet on a regular basis, I think 4 times a year.
And then some for the CEOs, yeah. We're meeting 6 to 8, every 6 to 8 weeks.
So it sounds like we do have plenty of opportunities to bring items of concern through that channel.
Was it, I'm trying to remember, was he on the previous list? Because we.
I think he was, yeah,
Councillor,
from memory.
yeah. Because I mean, if he was already previously on it, but then the former mayor, Fricker sort of won the vote, and then.
Yep.
So he was already previously nominated, but didn't get up,
Yep.
basically, so. Yeah,
Deputy Mayor Griffin,
I'm happy with that.
thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment. I don't know the gentleman, so the decision we'll have to make, I guess, is can someone here do as good or better job than the person that we don't know putting their hand up for it? It's not a very easy decision to make. I'm just looking at my old agenda papers to see if we had his bio to at least give us some information about him. But it's it would be useful to know a bit more about him to make that decision. But might come in.
Thanks. Okay, any other thoughts on the approach around the table? Okay, so it sounds, unless someone speaks up and they're violently against not nominating, it sounds like that we're not nominating and we're going with item 1 of the recommendations, item 2 and 3 to dissolve.
So you're not.
nominating?
You're not.
No.
Nominate, okay.
No, I honestly don't think I've got time to do any more things than what I'm currently doing and still do a good job of them all. So if there's a willing participant who's already familiar with the space, then I think that's a pretty good option as well.
Christina?
Not really. Because if Palmer's very keen to do it, I should imagine there'd be an election. I can't really be bothered going through an election process.
We did consider him on the 27th of September.
Yeah.
So it's not helpful for anyone who wasn't here at the time, but there was some documentation about him, I believe, as I'm scrolling through.
So we can just not put
I can't
anybody
recall
else.
whether we voted for him along with,
Yeah,
I think we supported him.
Yeah, it was Mayor Fricker,
Members, my vague recollection is that Mayor O'Loughlin at the time indicated that this gentleman would be fine, but that he preferred Mayor Fricker due to the closeness of the relationship between Walkerville and Prospect, which guided that. And of course, I think Mayor Fricker, with her profile, garnered support from around here for the same reason. Beyond that, I know it's unhelpful, but I think, I think the point Mayor Larwood is making is that potentially by putting forward a candidate of our own, we're diluting the era vote, and we risk era not having their representative at all on Garrop, other than Councillor Leon Bruno from Campbelltown, who I think is the other era representative currently on Garrop. So I think that's if there is merit to an argument around not nominating in favour of someone you don't know,
Mm.
it is the fact that Mayor Larwood's suggested that there's already strong support within ERA for this gentleman.
Mm.
I know that's not particularly helpful, but that's what I understand the argument.
Well, it's more helpful, I guess, than not putting one up, because then you know that you're not going to have any say in it. Whereas if we do support the recommendation, we're a party to actually supporting something that may have our particular little region up there.
Well, there still will be ballot members. Remember, this is the
Yeah.
first step. It's a nomination process, and then there, once we have a field of nominees,
Mm,
this matter will be coming back to council in due course
mm,
for a vote. So you get to make a choice at that point.
mm,
One would imagine, as happened with Fricka, that there will be some candidates who will be active enough to put forward some bio information. And at that time, you can make a call on the merits of the relevant candidates.
I think we've got a general view
yeah.
of
Go with it.
proceeding that way.
Um,
So I'm going to move on to covered item 10.3, we've got on 10.4. Moving on to item 10.5, Bandy Kamunka Steering Group appointments. So noting as per the recommendations that the mayor is part of the steering group, we're looking for 2 nominations to join the steering group for the term of the council. Noting that in this instance, this wouldn't be something that we could put forward an amendment to vote on an additional number of people or a change in the term, because they're not our terms of reference. They're the, I'm using the right words, they're the terms of reference of the steering group. And so we might have our opinion, but we cannot say this is what we're doing. If we were in mind to do that, it would have to go to the steering group for review, which would require a process which might be quite lengthy. I guess what I'm saying is it's essentially not as the same as one of our internal committees or advisory groups where we're completely in control of that. So might just test the waters. So there is also there's no job description for this role. Some of the words we talked about this morning when I asked that question, what a good candidate would have in their kit bag, some of the words that were used were patience, flexibility with regards to timing and availability, the ability to have difficult conversations. And whilst it states that there's a certain number of meetings required, it's almost certain that there'll be quite a lot more non-meeting involvement required. So attendance at NAIDOC festivals, going off-site for meetings and other scenarios as well. So the expectation would be that the people who are on this steering group are available for that to do the role justice. So I just thought it was worthwhile making those points. So having said that, is there anyone here who would like to nominate? Councillor Barnett?
Yes, this one I'd like to continue on with, and I agree with the attributes that have been suggested that one has. So with some of the elected members who weren't here, so it was Councillor Alan Harrison, myself, and the mayor, previous mayor, sorry. So I have quite a good relationship, I think, with the group. So it's very important that one builds good relationship with the group. So I'd be happy as, to one that's experienced the group and how it works. But then, if there's a new elected member or one that hasn't obviously been on it before, that would be also good to have a blend.
A couple of points I probably should have made before. You can attend the meetings as an observer, I believe. The second part to make also is that in the terms of reference, there's a preference for diversity amongst the membership group. Thank you, Councillor Barnett, for nominating, but also suggesting that if there were other people who were also very keen to jump onto the steering group, that you might be willing to step aside. Can I just?
Well, no, because there's two two other positions, so I would be put
Oh,
forward.
if there's
for
two
that
more
one.
people, then that would be.
Yeah, and
Great.
also they're quite keen on having a gender balance as well. So,
Okay, so we're looking for two
one other,
nominations. Do we have anybody else who'd like to be part of this steering group?
I'd like to be even no one else.
So again,
I'd like to,
excellent.
if no one else is.
Is there anybody else who'd like to be on the steering group? Okay, looks like we've got our two, so thank you very much for that, and congratulations. Item 10.6. Appointments to Access and Inclusion Community Advisory Group. The mayor is on this group. The group consists of 10 people. And the construct of the group is 3 elected members and then 7 members of the community, my understanding. And so I guess the easiest thing to, unless there's any particular questions about this, I believe that Councillor Hollop through Councillor Stannon has nominated to be on this advisory group. So I'll note that.
She's asked me to nominate her, so
yeah,
I'm happy to do that now.
and I'd like to nominate councillor Tweed.
Okay, any further nominations?
How many did you say?
Well, currently there's 3 elected members, one of those being the mayor and 2 other elected members. So
So that
And
fills your, that fills your spots.
yeah, that fills. So unless there's any other,
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Is that for the full term? It doesn't sort of say, is that something that can be done by the year as well?
CEO,
Yeah, through you, Mayor Larwood. This is one of those groups where continuity is particularly important.
Yeah,
Because what we're doing is reviewing projects, policies, internal processes, a range of things that affect our interaction and our engagement with the disabled community. If you're asking my opinion on whether you could do it, the answer is yes, you can. If you're asking my opinion on whether you should do it, the professional advice from staff is you shouldn't. This is one of those ones where a term of council would be preferable for.
any further questions or any further discussions?
These are also open for observation, I think.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, if there are no further nominations or discussions,
I was really interested in this as well. But I don't know if I'm putting my hands up for too many things. But this is something that I definitely, want to be a part of and like to learn more about, but I'm happy to do it observing, not being
so
one of them.
just to say you definitely can come along and observe.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So,
then should an opportunity arise partway through the term where one of the members decided to resign, then that could be an opportunity, but at the moment you're not.
yeah, because Lillian, she hasn't been in anything, so I've already put my hand up for a few things, so I'll sit this one out and I'll just attend.
Great. Fantastic. Sorry. Are we required to have proxies in place for either
no,
PK or this one? Because I know in the past there were proxies for this one, because I was a proxy.
oh yeah, it's got 2 proxies.
So there was 2
for the
proxies. in the
Access
past.
and inclusion. So you could be a proxy, of councillor.
No, the recommendation.
But the current, that doesn't, but I believe the current,
It's within the terms of reference.
We took it out just because we're conscious of not outnumbering the community a little bit. We just thought it would track. If we left it just with the 3 members.
right, all right, thanks very much. I think we've covered all these items satisfactorily and we're 6 minutes ahead of time. Councillor Green. Thank you, happy with it?
12 minutes we maybe have.
See what I can do. All right, you can help out where you can. All right, so I'm going to bring us back into formal session. We're looking at item 10.3, Garrett casual vacancy. And the recommendation now is only part 1 and parts 2 and parts 3 are dissolved. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Councillor Brett, would you like to speak to the motion? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stanley. Would you like to speak to the motion? Any further debate, anything else that we haven't covered? That being the case.
Enough has been said.
Thank you. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Way to keep things moving. Definitely agree. Item 10.4. Voluntary membership to Prospect Arts Action Network and Citywide Public Art Roundtable, recommendations there. Do I have and we have the nominations filled in, so I haven't, oh, sorry, so we've got Councillor Barnett and Councillor Trindwin. And we have Councillor Trindwin and Councillor Alison De Backer for QPAR. So is that an amendment? Or are we happy to add?
Just a question through the chair, was there an amendment for the review parts as well?
We may well be. I can fill one.
Look, I'm happy to leave the wording for the team.
Okay. So. Do we have a mover?
And then, sorry, question, don't have an amendment then to include the other.
Well, I think we need a mover and a seconder, and someone
Yeah.
might then put forward an amendment.
Oh, well, I'll move that way.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Barnett, would like to speak to the motion.
I think we've said enough.
Fantastic. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Stanley would like to speak to the motion.
No, I didn't.
Any further discussion? Councillor Becker.
I'd like to move an amendment, hopefully it's on the screen because I can't read this.
So I'm going to guess that it's items 1, 2, 3, and 4, but not item 5.
That's correct.
And you're happy with that wording as it is?
I don't think we need one.
Okay. Any further discussion?
It might be, I don't know.
Can we take it in parts, please?
Have a second pulse.
Sorry.
Do we have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Wynne, would you like to speak to the motion? Any further discussion?
I didn't get to speak to them.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if I can.
Well,
Yeah.
I can ask you to sum up.
Oh, okay, unless there's any other discussion.
Is there anything else that hasn't been already discussed? That being the case, we'd like to sum up, Councillor Becker.
Yeah, but look, sorry it took a while to get here. I'm glad Councillor Trim's serving with me at the Citywide Public Art Roundtable. I think it's a really important function. You know, like I said, we're a creative community. Art's really important. Certainly, you know, I was really active in connecting people to businesses and arts along Prospect Road, and that's been really successful. People are looking for Instagrammable moments. But I'm also really keen that there's those overlap of projects and getting budget lines in our infrastructure projects so we can deliver art and creative projects that are embedded, not just bolted on. So the purpose of the review is just to align to strategic direction with the new council, and I'd encourage you to support the amendments.
Thank you very much. Let's put it to the vote. So we're going to take this in parts. So we're voting on part 1. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. So that's there. Part 2. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Part 3, all those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Okay, part 4, all those in favour? Against, it's carried. Division. Sorry, it's okay. So, division called by Councillor Bruce. So we've got a 50-50% chance of getting this right. So
Have to stand up.
you have to stand up.
Yeah.
Okay, so those against, please stand. Okay, so now we're up to part 5. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Division. 2. Okay, all those against, please stand. Thank you, Councillor. Great. Good. We're now on to, is there a part 6? Okay, all those in favour on part 6? Against? Carried? Division. Well done.
I can't not. I don't know.
Yeah, that's just- Thank you. Okay, thanks everybody for patience in getting through that. Now, we're now on to item 10.5. And we have, I'll wait till you get there. Governance. So we've got. Sorry, we have Councillor Barnett and Councillor Quinn. Okay, do you have a mover for the motion? Councillor Stanton, would you like to talk to the motion?
Oh, good, thanks.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brett, would you like to talk to the motion?
What he said, but I will say this is a really important committee. And thank the people who are nominating for it. I'll probably come along as an observer because I feel very strongly about this and just it's fantastic. There's support to continue this work. It's really good.
Yeah, agreed. And nothing from the chair. So is there anything else that hasn't already been discussed?
I'll sum up if you.
I'm getting to that. Councillor Stanton.
He has used the party popper tonight, not Gavin.
Could ignore that. Councillor Stanton, would you like to sum up?
I would, and I'd just like to reiterate what Deputy Mayor Groot said, and also it's following the work that former Councillor Harris started, and I think it's important.
Thank you very much. All those in favour of this motion? All those against? Carried unanimously. Item 10.6, appointments to Access and Inclusion Community Advisory Group. Have our recommendations there, and we have 2 nominations. We'll just same letter for governance catch up. So we have Councillor Hollett and Councillor Tweenuin. Fantastic. Do you have a mover? Councillor Tweenuin, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I have really enjoyed being on this group, and I really want to thank the chair of this group, Director Taylor, for chairing and leading such robust discussions. And I think what's really important with this group is that the trust and the building with the community members. And you know, we've had a few recent wins, and their voice through the Broadview project speaks volume. So I really look forward to working with this group in the following term, and I'm pretty sure Councillor Hollett will have a great time with the group as well.
Thank you very much. Tweed, do I have a second? Let's go again. Go. Go.
All right, I got the nod.
Councillor Barnett. Goodness me.
Yes, I just think, you know, I certainly enjoyed my time on there and, you know, it's a great group and I'm thinking that when we're thinking about like, or have agreed to do a review on where the arts and that's it. To my mind, it's similar to what processes happen with access and inclusion, whereby they are able as a group to cast the lens of access and inclusion over, for example, the Broadview Hub and Peppermint Gums Reserve and all that. And I would see that's a similar process, hopefully, we might be getting to with our arts. But that will be for that discussion.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Briefly from the chair, I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Barnett's point. If we're not doing this already, which I strongly suspect we are, then in the future, it will be something which is just part and parcel of anything we do. I feel like with Broadview, we kind of just remembered in time to bring this group to the table, and they were very happy to contribute some fantastic ideas, and I'm glad we did. But having this just embedded as a natural part of how we think about everything we do across all aspects of council will be a fantastic step. I'm sure we're on the path there if we're not there already. Councillor, if anyone would like to sum up. That being the case, all those in favour, against, carried unanimously. Great. Okay, on to item 10.7, Urban Corridor Growth Report, December 2022. Report on pages 61 to 120 with the recommendation on page 61. Do I have a mover? Councillor Baker, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I would. Look, this is I think a really important one, and I guess we're asking Chris the questions because I can't see. John Pierce is not available today,
He's got COVID,
and Julie's not available.
also unwell.
Okay.
So
So whether I don't know. Okay.
I can try.
Sorry, through the chair. My mistake. Yeah, so look, it's really important because I know for those of you in the previous council, for Med David O'Loughlin was very keen on this 1% growth urban corridors, shifting from the residential rate base in our streets to the urban corridors. So you'll be aware that the urban corridors and the rezoning, I guess, is a state initiative. It was part of their 30-year plan. Prospect was one of the sort of early uptakers, I guess, of this kind of development. But with that also comes issues around parking, amenity, building quality. So there's certainly been some fallout from this. There is sort of in the detail of the report, you'll see that they're noting the changing in building conditions. So a lot of people may have bought pieces of land, speculatively going to build on them, but given increasing interest rates and cost pressures from industry, what we anticipated with rates growth may not come to be in years to come. So this could affect us with our long-term financial plan, and also, I guess, how we fund our council if we're still keen to pursue this 1% growth. It's an arbitrary figure. We could say 10% if we wanted to, we could say 0.5%. At the end of the day, are we promoting development in our corridors and trying to shift rates pressure from, our residential streets, or are we happy to just, go with the flow and say, well, it's going to be too hard? I'd like to see the momentum continue. So we've budgeted for this financial year. So I'm certainly encouraging you to support the motion, but also ask questions of what's realistic and maybe some policy changes that we could look at. Certainly there's consultation out at the moment for the changes to the planning and design code. I've put a personal submission in about things about off-street parking and those kind of things. I'd encourage you to support the motion, but if you have any questions through the chair, ask the CEO.
Thank you, Councillor De Backer. Do we have a second? Councillor Group, sorry, to speak to the motion.
Look, I think councillor Backus given a really good summary. The only thing I was going to add, and I think over the last little while, over the last, let's say 3 months during the election campaign, there was a lot said around rate growth, but also I think what is perceived by members of the public is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units that have been built in Prospect. And I think, I remember we had the same conversation when we saw this report this time last year or sometime last year. In 22-23, there are 119 units with a net rate growth of $200,000. So we're not raking in the millions for all the YouTube viewers who are watching, which is a grand total of 1. That could be me, because I've got it on. So, but it is really important that we're not, you know, the development isn't bringing in the dollars that people think, because intuitively people see an apartment and going up and thinking that must be $1 million worth of extra rates. So I think this is a great report. It's on public record and is a historical record of what that actually looks like. So it is a great report. I think it's really good to get them in. I think the 1% is interesting. It could be 1, it could be 100, it could be 99. You know, it doesn't kind of matter to a degree, but I think we just need to keep pushing for that ability for us, particularly around commercial activity. And I note that there is going to be some over the next 12 months, particularly with some sales recently, and of course we've got property next door contributing as well. So I think that's all positive.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Group. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Barnett.
This is a very important report for us and also for our community, as been alluded to understand. You know, in one sense, I would have preferred it to have come perhaps as the only topic as a workshop topic, because there is so much to unpack on this. And it will certainly, I think, when we come to do our February workshop, or you know, in-house planning and all that, this I think will have quite a bearing on some of our discussion. And in one sense, you know, if you go back to when all this change happened on our, you know, we suddenly had an urban corridor and things started happening. And in one sense, it's sort of be careful what you wish for, because, and again, where the design wasn't there in the planning, you know, when you have things like garages that are too small, all the other host of things that we now have come home to roost, not of course just with us, but in well, particularly, you know, if you look at what's happened in Melbourne and Sydney, you know, and some degree in Perth, and now with us. So I think with this, to me, it will be like we need to watch the space. We need to take into account a lot of the information that's in it, and I think this will perhaps be guiding us, you know, or certainly my thinking over the next 10 years about where we go with this. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? That being the case, Councillor Baker, would you like to sum up?
No, thank you. Just back to your input, and I think it's a great idea to have that on the table when we do a strategic planning in February next year.
Thank you. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we're up to item 11. Are there any general business items of an urgent nature? It's gone. I actually have one to table, which you can see on the screen. CEO, can I just ask you advice? Can I just talk to this? Yes.
So I think we declare it urgent and explain why, and then.
Yeah. So I'm declaring this urgent, and I'm accepting this urgent as the mayor. And the reason being, there was some discussions with the group of business owners essentially who are putting on the Christmas markets over the weekend in Vine Street Plaza. And there's a lot of work being put in by that group to dress the plaza up, Friday night, bump in, Sunday, bump out. all at their own expense with some funding from us through one of our programs. And the discussion was, would we be open to leaving the decorations, not the infrastructure being the marquees and those types of things, but the decorations in the Vine Street area for a period yet to be defined at no cost and at no risk to council. And so I wanted to table it amongst this group here to test the waters on that, essentially. So again, no cost to us, no risk. There's no, the only part there. CEO, did you want to talk about the indemnity part of it, which is probably the critical factor to make sure it's covered?
So through you, Mayor Larwood, when this issue came up this morning, the request was whether or not we could insure through our insurance their Christmas decorations, given that they are their Christmas decorations and they will be leaving them in the public domain, presumably for the public benefit for a period of time, whether we could, in essence, indemnify them. Members, it's almost certain that our insurance will not cover assets that don't belong to us. As a consequence, what this motion would give me the capacity to do would be to have a conversation with the organisers of this market event and see if we can reach a reasonable agreement on indemnifying them for their decorations. What does that mean in practice? If we have a couple of $1,000s worth of decorations sitting in Vine Street Plaza for 2 weeks, and there are a couple of $100s worth of damage done to them by vandals or the like, that we would essentially pay them for that. So this would give me the capacity to come to an agreement with them where I would reimburse them if there was any damage done to their assets, assuming they were prepared to accept that as an agreement, because obviously it's a no-cost thing. But I don't think it's unreasonable for them to expect if they're going to leave them in the public debate for 2 weeks for the benefit of ratepayers and the community at large, that we could at least provide that sort of assurance for them. I note again that Vine Street Plaza is under CCTV coverage, at least most of it, and it is a very open public place and it's well trafficked. So I'm comfortable with that level of risk, provided we're talking about a couple of $1,000s worth of decorations. If the bump in is $20,000 worth of decorations, I'd be far less willing to indemnify that sort of an asset without, security or something else in place. And that might obviously push it outside of something I would be prepared to agree to, and consequently we might not be able to reach agreement. My intent here would be to try and balance risk against reward, essentially for the community, and to do that on the basis I've just mentioned.
Thank you, CEO. Sorry, from a process point of view, is it moving and seconding as motion? Somebody move it from the chair.
Now it's been declared urgent. You've moved it,
So
so you need a second.
So I'm looking for a seconder if there is one. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I'm aware that the organizer has done an excellent job in the past, and it's been a highlight, and even more of a highlight now to our activity. And so I think the CEO's covered the main points from a legal and safety point of view. I can't remember, apropos to this, does council have some other Christmas decorations like we've had in Barker Gardens? I can't remember seeing anything about it.
So I understand that we did, and they were vandalised, and they are either considered beyond repair or they are sitting somewhere waiting to be repaired.
Right. Okay, well, in that case, I think it makes it even, more of a reason to agree to areas of recommendation, perhaps.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Any further discussion? Councillor 21.
Question for me, Christmas decorations, what are we talking about, digital?
My understanding is it's a combination of lights and physical wreaths, and I haven't been privy to, I'm not sure if you've seen.
Is that Christmas baubles and
Yeah, it's a range of things. I haven't actually seen anything, but it's been According to one of the organisers, it's planned and designed. They've obviously worked with the team because it's in our public place. So yeah, it's a not inconsiderable display. So it will make an impact. That's the nature of the question. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions or any further discussion? Okay, well, I guess I will sum up. Given that we haven't got any other budget approved, as it currently stands, we've done some work toward brightening up the street and inside the building here. There's been a bit of work. This seems like a reasonably good opportunity to support a community outcome, which we're already supporting through the grant program. Good on this group of people for taking the time to put their hands in their own pockets significantly and to expend their own private time to bring this type of event, as other groups do. But these guys are doing a particularly good job. It's attracted quite a lot of attention, and I think it's going to be a good event over the weekend, and it seems like a logical thing to do if we're willing to accept the recommendations. That being the case, can I put it to the vote? All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to item number 12, reports for information. Would anyone like to pull out either item 12.1 or 12.2 for further discussion? Councillor De Backer.
12.2, just for a question.
So I'm going to, well, we vote for item 12.1 on block. What do we?
Yeah, without
Without the vote. Okay, so item 12.1, we're not looking for a mover or seconder.
Can I have a quick question?
Sorry. Yeah.
I've lost my place. There was an item in, and I can't remember which one it was, the Howard Street and Balfour Street. Is this where is one of the ones we're talking about?
If we're moving into one block, no, but unless if the mayor's willing to.
There's just an error. There's just an error. We can talk about afterwards. It's just a typo.
You can have a check to see about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so item 12.1, do we have a mover? Shannon. So I can speak to the motion.
No, thanks.
On block, sorry.
On block.
Do we have a seconder? It's no debate. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.2. Councillor De Backer, you withdrawn this item to ask a question.
Just, yeah, a question through the chair, just in regards to the timeline. I note that there is a workshop presented about the long-term financial plan in the 7th of February. I'm just confirming through the chair, is that before or after our strategic workshop?
So yeah,
So through you, Mayor Larwood, that's before the strategic workshop.
Cool, that's fine. In that case, I'll move it.
would you like to speak to the motion?
Yep, just briefly. So this is basically a schedule for the working of the annual business plan. Mayor and myself attended the audit committee and risk workshop last night. So it was very eye-opening, to say the least. So it's going to be, I'm really pleased to be on the committee because I think it will be really interesting to try and get my head around the numbers and help inform the council. And I think the decisions that we make in February will really help shape us as we go forward. So I know there's a lot of hard work happening behind the scenes, and I encourage you to support the motion for the good work that's ahead.
Thank you, Councillor De Backer. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Bonet, would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
Do we have any further debate? Councillor, sorry, Deputy Group.
Sorry, just two comments from me. Sorry, excuse me. First is for the council workshop 1 on 7th of March, we're considering council member budget bids, which I believe are being formulated from the conversations we had a couple of weeks ago as part of our review process about what's important to
I
us.
didn't realise that.
Well, should I ask that as a question? That'd be better.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Are those bids being developed as a result of the conversation we had a couple of weeks on the workshop?
So, yeah,
I'm not sure that is the completely accurate characterization, Ms. Moon. How's that process going to work?
Through the chair for this entry here, there will not be a specific budget date from the elected members on at the workshop on the 29th of November. We have sought the 3 key items from elected members, and staff will go through that as part of our budget process. Quite a few of them are already in our budgeting process, and we'll bring back to you and perhaps provide an account, I guess, as what we have done in the past, what was in, what was out, and what has been returned.
So I didn't necessarily ask that question. It's in the paper. It says elected member priorities for projects were discussed in the November workshop, and these will be considered and earmarked for the 4-year term of council and presented in the March workshops with details and options to deliver the projects. So I guess I'm just raising a little bit of concern if there's going to be another process for us to identify budget priorities, because we all got a chance to say 3, some of us said 4, some of us said 7. But you know, that may not be necessarily what we want to bring forward from a budget bid. So I'll just make that as a comment, really. The second thing is, it may be, this is a comment, not a question, it may be a little optimistic to have budget done in 2 workshops and possibly 3rd. In my time here, which has been 12 budgets, we've never achieved it in that time frame. So I just wondered if there is a redundancy beyond the 14th of March or presumably the 21st. If we need more time to do it. Let's hope we don't. I absolutely would love to work to that timeline, but I just know that we start getting into budgets, we're going to start talking about operating issues, we're going to start talking about operating budgets, and for new, there's half the people here, or almost half. Mark's been here, Councillor Sam's been here before, but they're new to the budget process, and so I would expect, as I was given in my first year of the budget process, a little bit more scope to understand the process and work through it. So I guess the question in that, Mayor, is there going to be redundancy beyond the 14th or the 21st of March if we need that?
I think from memory, last year we scheduled 3 and ended up with a 4th, but I might direct that question to the CEO.
That's correct, Mayor Larwood. So again, I think for the members who are returning, the process that we run last year is a good model and one that we'll probably repeat, follow. If we do need additional time to work through additional issues, and last year, members, it was really around the operating and recurrent budgets, if you recall. It's entirely possible we'll need to do so again this year. We're ready for that if we need to. We're already preparing for that. The other thing members bear in mind is we'll be better armed this year than we were last year for 2 reasons. One, we don't have the structural challenges that we were going through at the same time as the budget last year. We have a fully populated executive and leadership team, which is really going to help. The second component of that is that we'll have undertaken our strategic workshop in February, which will give us a much better sense of the overall position of council. And I know that there's not one position of council, there are 8 separate positions and a leadership process to work that together. But we have a sense that we're going to be much better armed this year for you than we were last year. And I think whilst the process last year was difficult, in the end, we got a consensus position before the end of June under difficult circumstances in an election year. And members, I think if that shows you we can do this, I'm confident we can get through it. Ms. Moon, anything to add?
Through the chair, traditionally the entire March and perhaps the first week of April has been earmarked for budget. So their scope in council workshop 3, which is per the plan, that all the March 4 weekends that we have 4 Tuesdays, that was the amount for budget.
This is called Mad March for a reason.
Yes.
I look forward to dot point 3 in Council Workshop 2 in particular, which is titled surpluses. So I look forward to that. Maybe it's a long one.
Hey, thank you for the question. Any further debate, anything we haven't already raised, we would like to discuss. That being the case, Councillor De Backer, would you like to sum up?
No, thank you.
Okay, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Item 13 on the agenda, council member reports and briefings. And just in case you all thought I dodged out and didn't do anything in the last month, I've asked the team just to prepare a report of the things that I did.
Through the Mayor, if I may, apologies from staff for not being more proactive in getting this ready and adding it to the report as a report as traditional. As many of you know, we've got some changes happening in the executive space right now, and this one was just missed. So apologies on behalf of the administration for that oversight.
Now, I haven't done one of these before. Do I need to ask someone to move it?
Because it's just a briefing and it's not a report. No need.
Sorry? No, okay, cool. On to item 14, motions on notice. We have one motion on notice, submission to the strategic review of the planning and design code.
That would be me.
So I have to move it. Councillor Backer, would you like to speak to your?
I'll read out the points. We'll get it here, and I'll talk to it a little bit. So I move that the council provides a submission to the expert panel on the planning system implementation review, addressing the matters identified below, the elevation of character areas to historic areas where appropriate, and also the inclusion of demolition protections within character areas, the development and implementation of additional policies within the planning and design code that allow for alternative forms of infill development that retain existing streetscape setbacks and tree canopy cover. The development and implementation of additional policies within the planning and design code that facilitate the delivery of EV charging stations on public and private land. That the transitional arrangements in place in relation to car parking funds be reviewed to allow council to alter the applicable contribution rate such that it has a continuing relationship to the actual market value of delivering additional public car parking facilities. That the council supports in principle the work of the Conservation Council and agrees that the regulated and significant tree protection laws require review and strengthening if South Australia's tree canopy cover targets are to be achieved. And part 2 is resolves for Mayor Matt Larwood to write to Nick Chermahin MP as Minister for Housing and Urban Development and Minister for Planning and Lucy Hood MP, member for Adelaide, in favour of greater demolition protection of the heritage and character buildings by the elevation of character areas to historic areas. I think Scott McCluskey for the technical words, because this is the sort of lingo that the planning system, I suppose, speaks. Those of you that have been around in Prospect for a while will have known there's been changes over the last 5 years. We've changed from, I guess, a council-based development plan to a statewide plan. With that, there's been some teething issues, and I guess one of the things that's fallen out of it is notification on developments, and that can be things like people building along the boundary. So if it's up to 8 meters and a certain height, they don't have to tell you. It just happens one day. Same thing with demolitions in some zones. You don't need to be notified. So the reasoning for that was, well, you know, people have a right to, and that's fine. But obviously that creates a lot of upset within the community. And I know anecdotally with the civil prosecutions, so council can't get involved with things like fences, but Prospect's really high up there of neighbours against neighbours, and that's a real shame. So I guess what my motion does is reiterates some of the conversations that are already being had behind the scenes between the planning department and some of the concerns over the past few years that you know, our residents and ratepayers have raised with us. So again, I've made a personal submission. I also attended last week at the Parks Community Centre. There was 8 people from the commission there and 4 people from the community. So we actually had their ears. They seem to be listening. And from all accounts, they're listening to things. What this motion doesn't do is say you can't demolish. What it just says is that, you know, we'll give adequate notification and sort of reiterate that, look, the form and shape of the building that goes in should be considered in a bit more detail. So we've done a lot of work in the background over developing character statements for some of our areas in previous years, and that's kind of been a little bit watered down with the new planning and design code. So what this motion seeks to do is just as a council to reiterate, I guess, what a lot of our community have been saying for the last few years. So I'd encourage you to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Backer. Do I have a second? Councillor Barnett, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I thank Councillor De Backer for bringing this to us. Certainly we do have the opportunity with this planning review, as with a lot of many other people, community groups, councils and other groups concerned with what happens in planning. And so I think through this, hopeful that we'll be able to put this and that to the planning authorities. And that we'll be able to get some traction on many of the things that are concerning, particularly our community as an inner city suburb. So I would like to also ask a question about where we're at with the city of Prospect regulated and significant tree amendment or an amendment, because my understanding is that it's probably up to last year that there was supposed to be a review of our significant and regulated trees in our city, as that's the only way that it would be accepted if we wanted to change anything in it, because our council is one, I think, with 4 other metropolitan councils, the only 5 in the whole of the state that actually have, I understand, that the minister has to approve anything that we do under that. It's not left up to the council itself to do. So I'd just like that be noted and followed up where we're at with that, because that did require money to be put into the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Any further discussion, Councillor Griffin and then Councillor Stanley?
Thank you, support the motion. I just want to propose an amendment, which I'm sure will just be a variation. The point 2 results the mayor to, I think, to champion Lucy Hood. I'm just wondering if we could copy in Steve Georgianis as our federal member for Adelaide. Now, I'm aware that planning doesn't fall into the remit of the federal government, but after us, we met with him, I'm not sure if that was in this council, the previous council, I think, and we started to develop that relationship about what's happening in Prospect. I'd just be useful for people to know our views, given that we have a Labor government in both state and federal. I think that would, I would like to propose that.
Mover and seconder happy with the amendment?
Yep.
Yes.
Have we got, so yeah.
Yes. AS.
Spelled correctly.
AS.
Oh,
Is it AS or IS?
Yeah, it's correct.
Is it?
yeah,
It's not intuitive
it's all A's.
many times.
Yeah, so you would know.
Thank you. So mover and seconder have accepted the amendment.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's variation.
All right, so all those, sorry, I'll go on to the next part. So
Yeah, so the mover and seconder are prepared to accept as variation, all agree, then it can be.
Yes.
Can I keep going?
yeah, keep going.
Great. Thank you to council for the motion.
All right. Any further discussion? Councillor
Full
Stanley.
stop.
Yeah, I think this is a very important motion. One of the brands of Prospect is the character homes and the heritage of what we have here. And once it's gone, it's irreplaceable. You cannot replace these wonderful heritage homes with stuff that's not inappropriate, that's inappropriate for the street. We've struggled with this for years and years and years, and it's just been like hitting our heads against the wall. And it seems that every year they take a little bit of control away from us until we've got nothing. And I think it's time that we claw back a bit of the control that we have and we need. So I agree with every part of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Any further discussion? Briefly from the chair, excellent set of recommendations, and some of these areas that Councillor Tobacco has been talking about for many years, so it's fantastic to see them come together, and look forward to getting the letter off to the MP and also Lucy Hood and also Steve Georgianis. Councillor Tobacco, would you like to say something?
Just briefly, look, thanks for your support. And like I said, it doesn't stop demolition. It's just notification, which is common courtesy. And it's not saying you can't build new buildings. It's just saying in keeping form and shape. That's it. But I think one of the things that I also raised at the review was that we can use the language about sustainability and embodied energy. It's actually a sustainability issue as well. So, you know, we've just had a report that shows you the cost of new materials and labor and all the rest of it. So I think we can, you know, relove some of our existing building stock. And that may take different forms of infill development. So I'm very encouraged that everyone's supporting the motion, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? Yes, carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Okay, now we are moving on to item 15 on your agenda, questions with notice. Neil, fantastic. Okay, so we're moving on to item 16, confidential items. The recommendation to move into confidence. Do I have a mover? So moved. And seconder? All those in favour? Okay, so I'm going to, for the first part. Now, do we want to, there was a request to switch the order, CEO, this morning.
Just a moment, who's seconded that, moving into confidence? Christine?
No. Councillor
Sorry.
Root
I
and
think Councillor Tween the Wind beat me by a hair.
The beast in
Closer, I didn't see you because the
Yeah.
speed of light was.
Light and audio, yeah.
Sorry, there was a request this morning to change the order that we go through the confidential items to discuss items 16.2 first.
You've already moved into confidence on 16.1.
All right, so we'll have to leave it as it is.
Sorry, Dwayne.
It's okay. Okay, so if you're not supposed to be here, then you should leave. And I'm going to leave and invite the deputy mayor to take the chair.
Well, now the mayor's gone.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
The-
Oh, sorry.
yes.